At my daughter's 18th birthday party, surrounded by family and friends, she stood up to give a thank you speech. "I want to thank Grandma Elena and Grandpa Ricardo for always being there for me," she said, her voice bright with gratitude, "and, Mom, thank you for working so hard to send me money for college every month. I know $1,400 is a lot, and I appreciate every sacrifice you've made." The room went silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "What money?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. My daughter Sophia looked confused. "The money you send me every month through Grandma and Grandpa. The $1,400 for my college fund and expenses." I looked across the room at my parents. My mother, Elena Vasquez, had gone completely pale, her hand frozen halfway to her wine glass. My father, Ricardo, was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Neither of them would meet my eyes. That's when I knew my entire life had been built on a lie. When I discovered the truth about where that money was really going, I realized I didn't know my parents at all, and more importantly, I realized I'd been funding my own destruction for over 3 years. Let me take you back to the beginning, to understand how we got to this moment that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. My name is Isabella Cruz, and I'm 30 years old. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment that I've been renting for the past 5 years. It's nothing fancy: white walls, basic furniture from discount stores, and a kitchen so small you can touch both walls if you stretch your arms out. But it's mine, and more importantly, it's where I've been rebuilding my life after my divorce. 3 years ago, the divorce from Marcus was, let's call it, complicated. We'd been married for 8 years, together since college. And I thought we'd grow old together in our little house in Scottsdale. But Marcus had other plans. Plans that involved his secretary and a complete dismantling of everything we'd built together. When the dust settled, I walked away with half of our savings, about $80,000, my car, and custody of our daughter Sophia, who was 15 at the time. Marcus kept the house, most of the furniture, and his new girlfriend. I kept my dignity and my determination to give Sophia the best life I could manage as a single mother. The transition wasn't easy. I'd been working part-time as a graphic designer while married, mostly handling small freelance projects from home. Suddenly, I needed a full-time income. I found a position at Meridian Marketing, a mid-sized advertising agency downtown. The pay was decent, $52,000 a year, but in Phoenix, with rent, utilities, car payments, and raising a teenager, it stretched thin pretty quickly. But I was determined to make it work. I had to. Sophia was starting her junior year of high school when we moved to the apartment, and I could see how the divorce had affected her. She'd become quieter, more withdrawn. She spent more time at her friends' houses than at home, and when she was home, she was usually locked in her room with her headphones on. I worried constantly that I wasn't giving her enough. Not enough stability, not enough space, not enough of the life she'd been used to. The apartment was a significant downgrade from our 4-bedroom house with the pool and the 3-car garage. Now she had to share a bathroom with me, and her bedroom was barely big enough for her bed and desk. The guilt was crushing. Every time I saw her cramped into that tiny room, doing homework on a desk we'd found at a thrift store, I felt like I was failing her. Marcus paid child support, $800 a month, but it barely covered her basic needs, let alone the extras that teenagers need. New clothes, school activities, gas money for when she started driving, and looming over everything, the terrifying reality of college costs. Sophia was smart, really smart. She maintained a 3.8 GPA despite everything that had happened with the divorce and the move. She was in AP classes, on the debate team, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. She talked about wanting to study veterinary medicine, maybe at Arizona State University, maybe somewhere out of state if she could get scholarships. But even with scholarships, college was expensive. I'd done the math over and over again. Tuition, room and board, books, living expenses, we were looking at least $25,000 a year, probably more. With my income and the small amount I'd managed to save, there was no way I could cover it all. That's when my parents stepped in. Elena and Ricardo Vasquez had been married for 35 years. They lived in a beautiful ranch-style house in Tempe, about 20 minutes from my apartment. Dad had worked as a supervisor at a manufacturing plant for most of his career before retiring 2 years ago. Mom had been a substitute teacher and later worked at a doctor's office doing administrative work. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. They'd always been good grandparents to Sophia. When Marcus and I were married and living in Scottsdale, they'd come over for Sunday dinners, take Sophia for weekend trips to Sedona or Flagstaff, and never missed a birthday or school event. When the divorce happened, they were supportive. At least, I thought they were. Mija, my mother had said one evening about 6 months after the divorce, using the Spanish term of endearment she'd called me since I was little. Your father and I have been talking. We want to help with Sophia's college. We were sitting in their living room, which had remained essentially unchanged since my childhood. The same beige couch with the crocheted afghans my grandmother had made, the same glass coffee table with the collection of ceramic birds my mother loved, the same family photos covering every available surface. Sophia was in the kitchen helping my father make his famous quesadillas. Mom, you don't need to, I started, but she held up her hand. Listen to me, she said firmly. We've been blessed to have a good retirement. Your father's pension, our savings, the house is paid off. We don't need much. But Sophia, she needs a future. She's our only granddaughter, Isabella. Let us do this. My father came into the room, wiping his hands on a dish towel. We've already talked to the bank, he said in his careful, measured way. We can afford to send her $1,400 a month for college. That should cover most of her expenses, along with whatever scholarships she gets. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Are you sure? That's a lot of money. It's our granddaughter. My mother said simply, it's what we want to do. I had them both, overwhelmed with gratitude and relief. The crushing weight of college costs that had been keeping me awake at night suddenly felt manageable. Sophia could go to a good school, maybe even out of state if she wanted. She could focus on her studies instead of working multiple jobs to pay for school. There's just one thing, my father said as we broke apart from the hug. We'd like to handle the money directly, set up an account for her, manage the transfers. It'll be easier for our taxes, and we can make sure the money goes exactly where it needs to go. It made sense to me. They were the ones providing the money. So of course they should control how it was distributed. Plus, I was already juggling so many financial responsibilities that having one less thing to manage felt like a blessing. Whatever works best for you, I said. I can't tell you how much this means to me. To us. My mother smiled and patted my hand. That's what family is for, Mija. That conversation happened in March of Sophia's junior year. By the time she was a senior, we had a plan. She'd applied to several schools, gotten accepted to Arizona State with a partial academic scholarship, and my parents had assured us repeatedly that the money would be there when she needed it. Don't worry about anything, my mother would say. Whenever I brought up college costs, we've got it handled. Sophia just needs to focus on her grades and enjoying her senior year, and she did. Sophia's senior year was wonderful. She was accepted into the Honor Society, got a part-time job at a local coffee shop that she loved, and even started dating a nice boy named Jake who was planning to study engineering. She seemed happy and confident about her future for the first time since the divorce. I, meanwhile, was working harder than ever. I'd taken on freelance projects in addition to my full-time job, staying up late nights and working weekends to bring in extra income. I told myself it was to build up our emergency fund, to make sure we had a cushion for unexpected expenses. But really, I think I was trying to prove something to myself, to Marcus, to my parents, that I could take care of my daughter, that I was a good mother despite everything that had happened. The extra work was exhausting, but it felt worth it. Every month, I'd ask my parents about the college fund, and every month, they'd assure me everything was on track. We're putting away the full $1,400 every month, my father would say, plus a little extra when we can manage it. By the time she starts college in the fall, she'll have a good foundation. I trusted them completely. They were my parents, they loved Sophia. And they'd never given me any reason to doubt their word. When I was growing up, they'd always been responsible with money, not wealthy, but careful and reliable. If they said they had it handled, they had it handled. Sophia graduated valedictorian of her class. I cried during her speech, partly from pride and partly from relief that we'd made it through the hardest years after the divorce. She was going to Arizona State in the fall to study pre-veterinary medicine. She had her scholarship, she had the money my parents were providing, and she had a bright future ahead of her. The summer before college was a happy time. Sophia worked more hours at the coffee shop to save spending money, hung out with friends, and spent a lot of time at my parents' house. They doted on her, taking her shopping for dorm room supplies, talking about her classes, making plans to visit her on campus. "We're so proud of you, Mija," my mother would tell her over and over. "You're going to do amazing things." When August came and it was time for the first semester payment, I called my parents to coordinate. "Don't worry about it," my father said. "We'll handle the transfer directly to the school. We've been in touch with their financial aid office. Everything's set up." I felt that familiar wave of gratitude. Even now, with Sophia 18 and technically an adult, they were still taking care of everything, still making sure their granddaughter had what she needed. Sophia moved into her dorm room on a hot August afternoon. The three of us, my parents and I, helped her carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, set up her bedding, arrange her desk, supplies. She was excited but nervous, exactly like any freshman should be. "Call us if you need anything," I told her as we prepared to leave. "Anything at all." "I will, Mom," she said, hugging me tight. "Thank you for everything, for making this possible." I hugged her back, feeling like maybe, finally, I'd done something right as a mother. That was a year and a half ago. Since then, Sophia had thrived in college. She made friends, kept up her grades, joined the pre-vet club, and even found a work-study job in one of the research labs. Every time we talked, which was at least twice a week, she sounded happy and confident. And every month, when I asked my parents about the college payments, they assured me everything was going smoothly. "She's doing so well," my mother would say. "The money is getting to her on time every month. She's being very responsible with it." I felt proud and relieved. The system was working. Sophia was getting her education, my parents were happy to help, and I was contributing what I could with my steady income and the occasional freelance project. But now, standing in my parents' dining room, listening to my daughter thank me for money I'd never sent, I realized that everything I thought I knew was wrong. The $1,400 a month that Sophia thought I was sending her, the money my parents claimed they were providing from their retirement savings, the financial security I thought we'd built for her education, none of it was real. And as I looked at my parents' pale faces, as I saw the panic in their eyes, I knew I was about to discover something that would change everything I understood about my family, my daughter's future, and my own life. "Sophia," I said slowly, my voice shaking, "can you sit down for a minute? I think we need to talk. To understand how devastating this moment was, you need to know what our family looked like before everything fell apart. We weren't perfect, but we were solid, or at least, I thought we were." Growing up as Elena and Ricardo Vasquez's daughter in Phoenix had been relatively stable. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood called Maryvale, where the houses were small but the yards were big, and everyone knew their neighbors. My father worked at Honeywell's aerospace division, coming home every evening with grease under his fingernails and stories about the parts they were manufacturing for military aircraft. My mother worked part-time at various jobs, substitute teaching, office work, occasionally helping at my aunt's restaurant during busy seasons. Money was never abundant, but it was predictable. Dad's paycheck came every 2 weeks like clockwork. Mom's income fluctuated, but it covered the extras: school clothes, birthday parties, the occasional family trip to Rocky Point in Mexico to visit my grandmother. They weren't the type of parents who indulged every whim, but they weren't harsh either. If I needed something for school, they found a way to make it happen. If I wanted something for fun, I had to earn it through chores or good grades. They taught me the value of hard work and responsibility from an early age. By the time I was 12, I was babysitting the neighbor kids to earn spending money. By 16, I had a part-time job at a local grocery store, bagging groceries and learning how to count change back to customers. They were proud of my work ethic. Always telling relatives about how Isabella never asks for handouts, she earns what she wants. This philosophy extended to everything in our house. We didn't have credit cards. If we couldn't afford something, we saved for it or went without. The car got repaired instead of replaced. Clothes came from discount stores or hand-me-downs from cousins. Vacations were camping trips to Flagstaff or visiting family in Tucson. Not fancy resorts or airplane tickets to exotic locations. But within those constraints, we were happy. My parents had a solid marriage, not passionate or dramatic, but steady and comfortable. They rarely fought, at least not in front of me. They had their routines. Dad watched sports on weekends while Mom worked in her garden. They both went to Mass on Sundays at Our Lady of Perpetual Help, the same church where they'd been married 23 years earlier. Friday nights were for family dinners, usually involving whatever was on sale at the grocery store that week. Transformed by my mother's cooking into something that felt special, my childhood was predictable. In the best possible way. School, homework, family dinner, television together in the living room, bedtime at a reasonable hour. Weekends involved yard work, grocery shopping, and visiting relatives. It wasn't exciting, but it was secure, and I never doubted that my parents loved me and would take care of me. When I went to college at Arizona State University, the same school Sophia would later attend, my parents were proud but worried. I was the first person in our family to pursue a 4-year degree, and they weren't sure how to navigate the financial reality of higher education. But they made it work. Dad picked up overtime shifts, Mom took on extra substitute teaching assignments, and they helped me apply for every scholarship and grant available. I worked 20 hours a week in the campus bookstore and took out student loans for the rest. It took me 5 years instead of 4 to graduate with my degree in graphic design, but I did it. And my parents were there at graduation, beaming with pride, my father in the same dark blue suit he wore to weddings and funerals. My mother in a new dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. When I married Marcus 2 years later, they welcomed him into the family with open arms. Marcus came from a more affluent background. His father was a successful real estate developer. His mother had never worked outside the home, but my parents didn't hold that against him. They liked that he was polite and respectful, that he had a steady job in finance, and most importantly, that he seemed to love me. The wedding was modest by Marcus's family standards but extravagant by ours. My parents contributed what they could, about $3,000 they'd managed to save over 2 years, and Marcus's family covered the rest. It was held at a nice hotel in Scottsdale with about 150 guests, an open bar, and a DJ who kept everyone dancing until midnight. I felt like a princess, and more importantly, I felt like my two families were blending seamlessly. For the first few years of marriage, things were good. Marcus and I bought our house in Scottsdale, a 4-bedroom with a pool and a 3-car garage. That still felt impossibly luxurious to me. My parents visited regularly, always marveling at the size of the kitchen or the fact that we had a separate dining room we only used for special occasions. "You've done well for yourself, Mija," my mother would say, running her hand along the granite countertops. "This is the American dream right here." When Sophia was born, my parents transformed into devoted grandparents. They babysat whenever Marcus and I wanted a date night, showed up to every birthday party and school event, and spoiled her with the kind of attention and small gifts they'd never been able to afford when I was growing up. They weren't wealthy enough to buy expensive presents, but they had something more valuable: time and unconditional love. My father, who had always been somewhat reserved with his emotions, became completely soft when it came to Sophia. He taught her to ride a bike in their driveway, built her elaborate blanket forts in their living room, and let her help him work on projects in his garage workshop. My mother taught her to cook simple Mexican dishes, braided her hair into intricate patterns, and listened with infinite patience to her elaborate stories about school drama and playground politics. Even when the marriage started falling apart, slowly at first, then rapidly, my parents remained a constant source of support. They never said anything negative about Marcus. Even when it became obvious that he was working late more often than could be explained by legitimate business needs, they never asked probing questions about why he'd stopped coming to family dinners or why I seemed increasingly stressed and distant. When I finally discovered the affair and decided to file for divorce, they were shocked but supportive. Marriage is sacred, my mother said carefully when I told them, but a man who doesn't respect his wife, that's not a marriage worth saving. My father, never one for many words, simply hugged me and said, "You and Sophia will always have a home with us if you need it." During the divorce proceedings, when everything felt chaotic and uncertain, my parents were my anchor. They helped me move into the apartment, driving their old pickup truck back and forth for 3 days to transport boxes and furniture. They painted Sophia's new bedroom a cheerful yellow color she'd chosen. And my father assembled her bed and desk with the same careful precision he brought to everything. When the divorce was finalized and I was officially a single mother, they stepped up even more. They picked Sophia up from school when I had to work late, helped with homework when I was overwhelmed with freelance projects, and provided the kind of stability and routine that I was struggling to maintain in our new, smaller life. Most importantly, they never made me feel like I was failing. In a time when I constantly questioned every decision, was the apartment too small? Was I working too much? Was Sophia getting enough attention? They consistently reassured me that I was doing a good job under difficult circumstances. "You're a strong woman, Isabella," my mother would tell me when I expressed doubts about my parenting. "You're giving Sophia exactly what she needs: love, security, and a good example of how to be independent." So when they offered to help with college expenses, it felt like a natural extension of the support they'd always provided. It wasn't charity or pity, it was family taking care of family, the way it had always been in our household. The monthly routine became comfortable and reassuring. I'd call my parents every few weeks to check in about Sophia's progress and the college fund. They'd update me on how well she was doing, how responsible she was being with money, how proud they were of her academic achievements. "She calls us every Sunday," my mother would report. "Always thanks us for the support, tells us about her classes. She's such a good girl, Isabella. You raised her right." These conversations were some of the highlights of my month. After years of worrying about whether I was providing enough for Sophia, it felt incredible to know that she was thriving in college, that the financial stress had been lifted from both of us, and that she was building a relationship with her grandparents that would last her whole life. I'd imagine her in her dorm room, budgeting the $1,400 carefully between tuition, books, meal plans, and spending money. I pictured her calling my parents to thank them, maybe sending them photos from campus or updates about her grades. The image of this three-way relationship, my parents as the generous providers, Sophia as the grateful recipient, and me as the proud mother watching it all unfold, felt like the best possible outcome of a difficult situation. During Sophia's first semester, I threw myself into work with renewed energy. I took on extra freelance projects, worked overtime at the marketing agency, and started putting aside money in a savings account I privately called Sophia's graduate school fund. If my parents were taking care of undergraduate expenses, maybe I could help with veterinary school later. I felt, for the first time since the divorce, like we were building something positive and sustainable. Sophia was getting an excellent education. My parents were able to contribute meaningfully to their granddaughter's future, and I was slowly climbing out of the financial hole that the divorce had created. The second semester went just as smoothly. Sophia's grades remained high, she seemed happy and engaged with her studies, and my parents continued to report that everything was going according to plan. When she came home for spring break, she was full of stories about her classes, her friends, and her part-time job in the research lab. "I love it there, Mom," she told me over dinner at my parents' house. "The professors are amazing, the research opportunities are incredible, and I feel like I'm finally figuring out what I want to do with my life." Watching her confidence and enthusiasm I felt like all the struggles of the past few years had been worth it. This was what I'd wanted for her, not just financial security, but the opportunity to discover her potential and pursue her dreams. As her sophomore year began, our routine continued unchanged. Monthly check-ins with my parents, regular phone calls with Sophia, and the comfortable feeling that everything was working exactly as it should, which is why the moment at her 18th birthday party felt like being hit by a truck. Standing in my parents' dining room, looking at their pale faces, I realized that the comfortable routine I'd treasured for over a year had been built on something that wasn't real. The $1.400 a month that I thought was coming from their retirement savings, the financial security I thought we'd achieved, the peace of mind I'd felt about Sophia's future, it had all been an illusion. And now, with Sophia looking back and forth between us in confusion, I was about to discover what had really been happening with that money. And why my parents looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. "Mom," Sophia said, her voice uncertain. "What's wrong? Why does everyone look so weird?" I took a deep breath, feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into an abyss I couldn't see the bottom of. "Honey," I said slowly, "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding about your college money."